5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to Dynamics of Dialogue. And today I am your guest host, TeKesha Smith. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I also happen to be the clinical director at the At Promise Center for Chris 180, and I have my own business. It's called TK Smith and Consulting, where I provide clinical consultations. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Tai Davis. Welcome, Tai.
Hey. Thank you for doing this for me, because I certainly can't interview myself, so I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate this opportunity myself. This is a first, so I welcome the opportunity, and I am always excited to speak with you about this and definitely listening to your story. And part of your story is, one of your stories that we often talk about or that you've shared with me before is about your past. And today we're going to kind of finish up what we were talking about the last time we met. But today we're going to focus more on recognizing the need to recover, because that's necessary to our survival, and the positive side of recovery. And some people may have questions about, recovery. What is recovery? What am I recovering from? Oh, I've moved past it. This happened a long time ago. And many people don't know what to look for or don't know the signs and symptoms of what we call trauma, which can also be given a diagnosis of what we call post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that looks like in children and adults is a little different, but some of it is basically the same. There can be some eating disturbances, sleep disturbances. You can be clingy. Most children are clingy, irritable. They have deal with poor memory or memory loss. Some of them will deal with some somatic complaints. There may be some delays in their development, a lot of anxiety, a lot of isolation, daydreaming. Even we see disassociation with children and adults as well. Aggressive behavior, sexualized behaviors, difficulty trusting others, interpersonal difficulties. Sometimes we also see an increase in medical problems. Same thing for adults. Just very, very very, very similar symptoms when it comes to adults. That includes the sleep and appetite disturbance, some anxiety, difficulties trusting other people, isolation, the disassociation, poor impulse control, eating sleep disorders. In adults, I see a lot of physical medical complaints like high blood pressure, inflammation, poor digestive system. And those are just some of the signs and symptoms, like I said, that are associated with trauma and related to post-traumatic stress disorder and including complex post-traumatic disorder. But there are ways for us to recover from that. You don't have to stay experiencing those types of behaviors and symptoms. Those symptoms and behaviors cause a huge issue or problem when it comes to really just being able to function. And I was going to ask you, could you talk more or talk to us about, one, any of those symptoms that you may have and how it impacted your life?
Oh, boy. Yes, thank you for going into that, because that is, it's actually a huge thing. And what I actually experience now that is problematic is actually dissociation. And it is very scary. I did not recognize what it was and completely freaked out when it first started happening to me. The way it first showed up, and I have to talk about this. The way it first showed up is one day I apparently had been cooking and I burned myself, but I don't remember cooking. I don't remember burning myself. I don't remember feeling any of the pain. All I know is I had this really painful burn mark on my arm. And it's like 1 minute I just kind of woke up in the pain, like not woke up from a sleep, but it's like 1 minute I just became aware of this pain. And I'm like, okay, that freaked me out. It actually freaked me out so bad I ended up checking myself into the hospital. Because it's like I wasn't really there. It's like my mind had just gone away and I'd lost time that seemed like hours. And I don't know what happened, but I know that it was me because I'm in my apartment alone. And, so the dog got fed because there was food in the bowl. I don't remember doing it, and so I don't, it was scary, and most recently it happened again where I had this itching on my shoulder and I couldn't figure out, what is this? I'm reaching back there and I'm scratching and I realized there's this big scar that's healing. It's like it's a scab on my shoulder. And I'm like, and as I'm scratching it, it's painful. But I'm like, well, if it's painful now, then that means it probably should have been painful when it happened. Right. I don't remember it. And it's a really dark scar. It looks like it was, I don't know, just a couple of centimeters, like, a centimeter or two wide, maybe a centimeter wide. So it wasn't like a fingernail. It wasn't like I scratched myself with my fingernail. It looks more like I hooked myself onto something and it scratched me, and I don't remember what happened. I don't remember it happening.
You don't recall at all. You can't. No. You don't have memory of possibly sticking yourself or getting hooked up on anything.
Nope.
No recollection at all.
Nope.
Wow. Yeah. That unfortunately that is a common symptom of trauma, and that's associated with PTSD. That's the disassociation component that we spoke of earlier. And that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I just want to understand how dangerous that can be. Like you said, you fed the dog, the dog had eaten, but you don't even remember placing the food and the water in the dog bowl.
Nope.
Wow. Nope. Okay.
So it's like to be aware that you're doing stuff and don't know you're doing it. That's scary. Yeah.
And that explains why, if people will think about it, how sometimes after someone has had a traumatic event, it will look like they've been, like they're paralyzed. They're walking, but they're paralyzed. They look like they've completely zoned out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
My coworkers, I'm sorry, now that you say that, when I first had the nervous breakdown, right after I stopped working, one of my coworkers said to me that I looked like I was in a coma. She said that I looked like my hair could have been on fire and I wouldn't have noticed.
Would not have even noticed. It felt it, because the same thing with the scratch or the mark on the back on your back. You don't even recall when it happened, but we know it happened because there's evidence of it happening.
Yes.
And those are things that cannot be dismissed, and that's a clear sign of an opportunity that recovery is needed, or for recovery. So let's talk about your recovery process and what that's been like for you, what that journey of recovery process is. If you can tell me about when did it start, where did it start, and what did it look like?
Boy, okay. So it's kind of really hard to pinpoint it. I will say I first became aware of this, that there's a recovery movement back in 2014. I was seeing a therapist, and at the center I was seeing a therapist at, they had these people called CPSs come in and teach this class on wellness. So I was like really interested, and they're talking about all these things, and that's the first time I ever heard anybody talk about recovering from any type of mental illness. So I had applied to become, and the CPS is a certified peer specialist. It's a person that lives with a mental health diagnosis, and they are a peer support. CPSs are actually practitioners, so that, you can, the services that when you work with people, you can bill Medicaid and Medicare, but you have to be working under an organization to do that. So you're a person with a diagnosis, and you help other peers. I applied to be a CPS then, and it didn't come through. So that whole idea kind of just went out of my head. And I kind of went on to find different ways of connecting with other people, though, in this community. So I finally got connected to some folks at the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network again for a second time when I went back and applied for a job there. And I, happened to come across this great recovery community, and, it seemed like there's a bunch of people that are just like me that are struggling, but they, are in recovery from all kinds of different things. Well, largely substance abuse. So after a while, that kind of got to be a little bit of a challenge because, some of the direction I got from people that dealt with things like schizophrenia, I could identify with them because the scatteredness in the brain, you know what I mean? I may not have schizophrenia, but I could certainly connect with what some of them were experiencing. So they gave me, ideas to do things like meditate and use sound healing. And I did that, but I really didn't grasp it, until after I became a CPS, after I worked, in mental health for a little while, and I saw all these great things that people were doing in recovery for substance abuse, but I'm like, yeah, but it's not really touching on my experience, right. So that's where I started to really dig deeper and delve into spirituality. I got a life coach. And that was helpful. That was those two things, connecting with a sense of spirituality, not religion. Religion is made by people. Spirituality comes from your soul, right?
To clarify. Yeah.
So it was after that experience that I really, began to delve into it. In the last episode, I talked about how transformational it was. It was really transformational in that my life coach gave me what they call a transformation of identity matrix and a list of feelings. Now, it's amazing. It's weird that you have to get a list of feelings, but, what I found is that she would ask me about a feeling and I would tell her what I was thinking. And I realized then that it was only through this process that I realized I'm disconnected from my real feelings.
Absolutely. Because through trauma, all right, you lose feelings. Sometimes we call it stages that people go through when trauma happens and you're dealing with or been diagnosed or dealing with PTSD or complex PTSD. But the first stage that we talked about was this disassociation that you speak of. And it's kind of like your circuit having a break, okay? It's like everything shuts off. There's a feeling of numbness because naturally the body will go numb to protect. It will naturally do things physically and mentally to protect itself. So there has to be an opportunity for what was there before, what you were able to do before to return. So there's a return of feelings that must be allowed, an opportunity that must be allowed, because then we have to figure out what it is that you need. And in order for that to happen, your feelings have to return. So I think therapeutically that was the correct thing to do. That makes sense. And it sounds like it worked.
Oh my God, did it work? I feel connecting with my feelings allowed me to really be in touch with my authentic self. I didn't even really understand that, there was a self that I had. The ego is the super ego, the id and the ego, right?
That's correct.
And my super ego was the part of me. That's the part of you where, the narcissism may exist. That's the part of you where it's like your front man, that's the part of me that was interacting with people. So and it was like I was really interacting with people on a surface level because I wasn't connected to myself. I couldn't really have real authentic connections with other people, because I'm not able to tell you when I'm really angry. Instead, I just go off, think about it, and get mad. This is what I would do.
So that goes back to being able to identify what you need, and how can you tell other people what you need when you don't have the language, the vernacular, to be able to identify it for yourself. So that's a necessary process or stage of healing.
Right.
What were some of the things that you were feeling? Can you tell us about this?
Oh, boy. It was overwhelming. I think that's why. Yeah, I think that's probably, I'm sure that's why I disconnected from those feelings. I felt feelings of lack of self-worth. So maybe it would be like in a relationship, a boyfriend might make a comment to me, and it would just hurt me so deeply. It would just impact my self-worth in a way that is like, why do I keep hearing this? It's kind of like with these new age messages we hear, well, if it's everybody else and then it's you, then the problem is you. And so I felt like I was the problem, because I'm like, well, why does everybody do that? So I really felt like something was wrong with me. But in reality, it wasn't that something, in the regard of disassociation, there was a problem. But in these instances, this is just interpersonal. I wasn't able to really express how I felt, because I'm like, well, I'm always questioning myself.
Right. And that which impacts your actions, how you move forward. The two go hand in hand. So it becomes a merry-go-round if we don't acknowledge and build and work on how to express ourselves, but figuring out what those feelings are and being able to identify them. That is a necessary part of self-care. That's how one way that we are able to take care of ourselves and hold ourselves accountable and being committed to us, ourselves.
It wasn't until I got it was really freaky too, because she would go through the exercise with me and she would give me the feelings inventory, because I would have to look at that list and think about it and connect to what I would see and say, okay, this is what this feeling is. And that was really weird for me, because I'm like, wow, how am I not able to name these feelings? And then I would go and look at, maybe a belief I might have had about myself, like, I don't have any worth, which would have come from the experiences, that I've had going through such sustained trauma for so long. And like I talked about in the last episode, it was really impactful for me when Davis came and took my brother, out of the home and, brought him to safety, and they just left me there. So that really, and my mom, that really impacted me so deeply. My self-worth, it's like, it just was awful, but so I really didn't understand that I had that belief about myself, though, until I went through this feelings inventory. And when she gave me that and I recognized, okay, this feeling means that I'm lacking self-worth, there's in that identity matrix, right? There's a whole list, a whole write-up on worth. And as I looked in it, it wrote out all these statements about what it looks like when you don't believe that you have self-worth. And I was astonished, because I felt like they were reading my mind. I felt like, how can I read something on paper, and these are all deep-seated beliefs that I held about myself that I really hadn't even acknowledged, but it all resonated with me because I knew I had felt that way in the past, so that really opened up a lot for me.
Well, that's good. It sounds like your journey with a life coach has been deep and profound.
Yes.
And it's provided, definitely some healing, but it's necessary for us to understand that we have to do the work.
Yes.
We don't feel like it, even when we question it. You went in and you dug deep.
Oh my God!
I appreciate that because so many people will say, "I've tried everything and nothing has worked." Well, have you really tried it? Did you really try? And did you really try everything? And part of your own growth is being uncomfortable at times. And I'm sure everybody's heard
Yes.
Yeah. And releasing.
Yes.
You got to be uncomfortable. If you think about it, throughout the developmental process, I remember having this myself growing up, but it was something called growing pains.
Mm-hmm.
That is a medical term called growing pains. You're going to grow. You're going to change. But it is going to hurt sometimes. And that's okay. We can get through it.
I think that what we tend to do, though, is I think in society, not just, it's a cultural society thing that when we feel deep emotional pain, we suppress it. And if we don't ever allow ourselves to feel that pain, we can't cope with it. And so what I did is I realized, damn, I'm having all of these problems,
right.
I was so desperate to try something. I just started letting myself feel the feeling, and I just have to sit there and cry it out until it was done.
And that's okay, because there will come a point in time where you can no longer run.
That's right. That's right.
No longer, either physically, mentally, or emotionally, or all three. Mm-hmm. And then what manifests or what happens? Who are you when you can no longer run?
Right.
You realize you was having all of these problems mm-hmm. with relationships, with communications, with people who you were connecting with. That sounds like, that at that point it became an eye-opening experience or moment for you. You may not have said this, but you realized on some level that you can no longer run.
Go ahead.
And the pain was too great.
It was so great. I couldn't run anymore. The nervous breakdown made that possible. I couldn't, I ran and ran and ran and ran, and I call it a nervous breakdown, but I guess it was called a major depressive episode. That's what the onset of the flashbacks, the auditory mm-hmm. and visual flashbacks and things like that. So it was like my brain stopped me. During that period of time, the years of running brought me to a point in that breakdown where I experienced what the neurologist called pseudo-dementia. So what was happening to me is that I would be, I'm driving around my neighborhood, places that I've been 1,000 times. And all of a sudden while I'm driving, I couldn't remember where I was going. I didn't recognize my surroundings. And I would just have to pull over. And it is so unnerving for something like that to happen. But what she explained to me, they did the brain scan. They stuck the little things on my brain, and I sat in the chair, and I remember her asking me to, relax. And I'm like, well, I think I'm relaxed, but I was so disconnected from my feelings, I couldn't even tell that even though I felt relaxed, what I didn't understand is that I had normalized hypersensitivity. So I had to find a place of being relaxed even that way. But on the brain scan, it's, flopping up and down like a monster because I'm just all over the place,
And it became normal for you.
It became normal, and so she explained to me what it's really like is the brain just throws out all the information. When it's overstressed, it throws out all the information it doesn't deem as necessary. So I was literally put into a position where I couldn't run. My brain would no longer allow me to run. It literally shut down. I had cognitive impairments that made me have to leave my field of work. It was difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's how, that impacts or that just, first, that of course impacts your entire life, every component, especially not being able to work, which impacts, you financially, but it speaks to relationships. It speaks to, really, it renders you vulnerable.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it renders you even more vulnerable. It becomes a safety issue now, which is more important than the financial component. But now you're vulnerable.
I was so vulnerable. I didn't even. When you talked about that, what it brought up for me, as Black women, we're always told we're strong. We're always expected. And the thing that was so lonely and isolating is that people around me couldn't understand, like the people in my family, my husband, my son, they couldn't understand that I was not capable in that time of functioning at the same capacity I had always been. I was a high-tech person. You know, I was a business analyst on a process engineering team. I was about to start my IDOL certification. I'd already gotten my Six Sigma green belt. So they were used to me being very analytical, very capable, always on top. I was a go-to person at work, but I couldn't do it. And instead of getting compassion, I got a lot of anger. Why can't you do this? Well, I need you to do this. But you know, so interpersonal, I was extremely vulnerable, but it's like going through that process. Really, the only person that kind of even allowed space for me to be vulnerable was my mom. She came down from New York, which is significant because I'm living in a house with my husband and son, but I still needed my mom to come down to help.
Okay. We need our natural support.
I did no, but and it was challenging because, you know, my therapist had challenges with it because she wanted, and I'm sure you would probably agree as a therapist, I needed the family support. I needed the internal support. I needed the support of the people that were already in my house because my mom was not, you know, she lived in New York. That's her environment. She wanted me to be able to develop the support with my husband and son, and that wasn't happening.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, so interpersonally, I think as a Black woman going through that experience, what I was not allowed by the general community at large was vulnerability. I wasn't allowed that space. And it was a lot of criticism in my, you know, it was currently active at the time in my chapter. It was, you know, no one understood. It was really heartbreaking because I was mentoring some young girls, and there was one night when I needed to, I was supposed to pick the girl I was mentoring up from practice. Her mother was out of town, and I would have her stay with me when her mom was out of town. So I was supposed to go pick her up from practice, and I couldn't. I couldn't because my psychiatrist had decided to commit me in the hospital on a 1013.
Okay.
So
for people who know what a 1013 is, it is a involuntary transport to what we call an ERF, that's an emergency receiving facility, emergency room or department, or a psychiatric hospital to have you evaluated. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me. And the key about that is that it's on a 1013, it's involuntary. So that means that I didn't have the option of refusing. There was nothing I could do. Even if I refused, they told me they would call the cops and the cops would make me go. And that's exactly what would happen, right?
That is correct. So once that 1013 is signed, the individual no longer has a choice whether or not they want to go. Once I sign that form, I've basically taken away your right to choose. So you no longer have the choice to go or to not go.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right. So, and so that was really hurtful, you know, because it's like I couldn't understand. Why couldn't they understand? I had to call another person on that team to pick up the young girl for me and keep her, or at least connect with my, you know, and she was angry at me because I'm taking up her time. But I mean, nobody could understand that. You know, for me, in my mind, you know, this is a young girl I'm mentoring. So in my mind, it's not really appropriate for me to have my husband, you know, as a person that's been through sex abuse, you know, and I'm not saying that I'm certainly not saying that my husband and son would do something, but I'm saying in my mind, where my issues go, I wouldn't call my husband and son to get her and deal with that situation. They weren't members. They weren't on that team. You know, you know, I just believed that I needed to reach out to the resource that this is what we were doing as a group. So that was really hurtful, you know, so I lost a lot of connections with friends.
Okay. And that's typical when people are going through these types of situations and they are hurting. That's a part of the separation component. And unfortunately, as as a community and as a culture, African Americans doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to supporting our people with regarding anything with behavioral health issues, and that's something that we have the capacity to do and to do better, but we don't. And for me, that is a choice. So I'm sorry to hear that, but just know that people like myself, and this is why it's important for you to tell your story, to be a part of a movement that is changing that narrative within our community, especially with Black women. Often we are not heard. People will ignore the obvious signs and symptoms, and it will be dismissed. We have a tendency to what's called adultize our young women. Our young ladies are females. They get labeled as fast. They get labeled as, well, she can do this to take the role of mama when mama's not there. Mama has to do this. And this is how situations come about where our young girls get violated. They continue to be ignored and go unheard, and then we become broken. And then to not have a community to be able to come in and not only support our process of healing, but don't even agree with it, don't know what it looks like, don't understand it, refuses to acknowledge it. We'll label it as weak. She's not a strong Black woman. Which, I'm not going to get off into this, but it leads to the whole component of this Black girl magic, that, hashtag that gets thrown out there. I want us as a community to be very careful with that, because I don't want to continue to perpetuate this image of Black women not needing help. We need help. We need the support of our fathers, of our brothers, of our husbands, of other sisters. We need the help. So I'm just passionate about this. The listeners will have to forgive me, but I need for them to hear me, because healing is going to be necessary to our survival. And it's a necessary part of recovery. It is recovery.
It is.
So yeah. So to back to you talking about your recovery process and all the positive aspects of your recovery process. What were some of the feelings as you began to heal that you experienced? What were some of the positive feelings?
I would say that some of those positive feelings definitely started on the spiritual journey, with the burning of sage. Oh man, that in particular, there's different kinds of sage. What I have right now is cedar, but there's a difference between the way they smell, and the way that the white sage smells is just so, it's very soothing. It's hard to explain. It's very soothing, but the way it made me feel was very peaceful. It felt like I created an atmosphere for myself. So, having this peaceful feeling, kind of like, burning the sage and sitting back and relaxing was like almost like creating a little cocoon for myself.
Absolutely.
So a safe space.
Right.
Yes. So I guess because in that way, it's almost like, how it feels when maybe, you had a good relationship with your grandma when you were a kid, and your grandma always wore this particular perfume. And when you smell that perfume again, it makes you think of your grandma, and you get all of these warm feelings. It brings back all of these wonderful memories. That's kind of what it did for me. It kind of connected me to nature even. That made me feel really good. And then the next thing I did was bought myself a Himalayan salt lamp. I bought two, one for me and one for my son.
Nice.
That was nice, because then it really accentuated the atmosphere and created this glow. So it was almost like when I would go to sleep at night, burn the sage, light up that sage, because even though you light it for just a minute and it goes out, but it smolders and the smell lingers in the room. So the room would be filled with the smell, and then this beautiful warm glow of this orange pinkish salt lamp, it made me feel safe. I realized in this recovery process that there were things that I could do. I could create an environment where I felt calm, peaceful, and safe. And then I began to get addicted to that feeling because I was like, this is great.
Right. I think, what's her name? Jennifer Lewis. She's one of my favorite actresses.
Mm-hmm.
I look up to her because like her, like you, she speaks openly about her past and where she is now. But she spoke about, for so long, she was unhappy. She was miserable. But once she got a taste of some peace and some happiness, she was protective about that. And she was really clear. And I think her statement was, whenever crazy or dysfunction or toxic decided to roll up on her, she was like, no. You don't have the right, and nothing does, to steal. So no more of my summers, is what she said. Mm-hmm. So she got addicted to that peace of mind, that happiness, that glow, that positive energy, her being able to function. So she wanted more of that. And she realized that she could control that and live in that as much as she wanted to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it sounds like what you've done or what you've created is what I call a happiness plan. We plan to, we're going on this vacation. We plan to get married. We plan to have this baby. We plan to have this house. We plan on how we get this job. Well, we can plan to be happy. We can plan to be at peace. And your process, what I love about it is it's unique. But it was very intentional, and it was still created, and it was done, and you're still doing it. That's the key. That's the key, is that it was intentional. Once I became, and I'm glad you brought up Jennifer Lewis, because she is the person that really, listen, I love her. I would love to interview her. Oh my gosh, when she gets out on her Instagram is lit. When she gets out there singing those videos, she makes those impromptu videos with her friends. It is so awesome. And she expresses this freedom, and part of that, I can tell, part of that is this little mania, right? But there's a beauty and a freedom in it to get out and use it. I believe that she has learned how to take some of the symptoms of her bipolar and use it. She talked about how when the doctor first recommended medicine, she didn't want it because she's like, that's my shtick. That's my thing. Yes. But take my edge away from me. Yeah, I remember that. Yes, because her edge is just what makes her so, we all love it, but it's the downside of the edge that we don't see on camera. But she's mastered and fine-tuned that edge on screen and on her, her platform. And that's what really inspired me to say, you know what, she has learned how to make this thing turn into a positive. Let me do that. And I had to look at what, my traits were. And I had to take those and learn how to build those into strengths. Right. You've done a very good job of that. And I've fortunately witnessed your growth and development, the process of your growth and development. And what I can say is that you are very intentional, and you are intentional in aligning yourself with peace and creating conscious choices. Yes. And I think for you, you have definitely learned and taught me and many others that authenticity equals happiness. And that's what we should be striving for. And connect truthfully with ourselves. That's the importance of you telling your story, is that you are able to connect truthfully with yourself. That's something that Jennifer Lewis talked about as well. You've got to be able to connect truthfully to yourself, be clear on it, and take actions according to that in order to sustain. And that's exactly what you've done. So thank you. Yes, thank you. It made me feel good. I feel like really special and important because I have this therapist that does all of these great things telling me I taught her something. No, it's it's in the work that you do, you telling your story. See, I don't think people understand how profound it is and what it takes for someone to finally take off all the layers, all the masks.
Yes.
And this is me, this is who I am, and really it's up to you to deal with whatever your emotions and thoughts and feelings is about me and who I am.
Right.
To live authentically is to live at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And you continue to make no apologies for it. So I'm going to exercise you, to challenge you to continue to tell your story, because more people, more women, more Black women, more young Black sisters will need to hear it, and they'll need to see it. And you walk it. You show it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job. Now, what's next for you with the journey and everything else? Yes.
Well, what's next for me is, it seems as though, here's the interesting thing. You know how people talk about how the universe does all these things, when you get your chakras aligned, how things get better, how you can manifest things. I always believed that was straight BS. I did. I always thought that was straight BS. But since I have been on this path of being more intentional, so many things have opened up for me. So, last year I launched Dynamics of Dialogue last January, and I moved it into a podcast. And now I've got so many great opportunities coming up. I have a gentleman, Oski from 11 High Holistic. He
nice.
Yes, he makes cannabis oils, and he's a nutritionist. He's a holistic living person, and that's the brand of his business. And we're going to be doing a series on cannabis and nutrition. And we just talked about it the other day. We're starting with cannabis and nutrition, and then going to whole food, plant-based eating, have an entire series, because, I want to focus on wellness. I've republished my first book, Mindfunk Times 21. Thank you. I'm so excited. When I first wrote this book, I still carried a lot of shame about my trauma, about my experiences, and more particularly about how I responded to that trauma. But as I healed, and I accepted when I healed and did the shadow work, meaning, acknowledging those feelings, acknowledging the dark parts of myself, and accepting the dark parts of myself. Right. I'm good. I'm like, like, what can somebody possibly tell me about me, right?
You told your truth.
I told my truth. Right. So, and I find that it's beautiful, and I'm going back and looking at the reviews, and I'm finding how people are so changed, so positively impacted by this book. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm also participating in another book, in an anthology called a Poetic Anthology. So I've got those two books out. And I just started working on my third, Soul Catcher. And that's it's going to be a self-help sort of autobiographical self-help book. I couldn't get that word out. And this is also part of my challenges. Sometimes I just have struggles with words that are just regular. But I'm getting that story out in a self-help type form to kind of walk people through what it looks like and provide the helpful, I didn't want to just tell my story, because the story alone is really heavy. It's hard.
Right.
But, I'm conscious, again, being intentional. I'm conscious about where I leave people when I tell my story. So that's why I wanted to do it that way. So I'm excited about that. And I've even been asked to participate in another project from my alma mater. I went to Rutgers University, yes, and I've been asked to participate in a book project relating to Paul Robeson.
Okay.
Yes, from the Alumni Association. We'll be putting something out in that regard. And so I've got so many great things, and then I've got opportunities, with you opening up the door for me to work with young girls again. Yes, I love that.
That is going to be something else that I invite you into, definitely with our younger generation. And I also think meeting and sharing your story and your recovery with women within my own demographics, because
Absolutely.
we're raising this younger generation, and what are we transferring over onto this younger generation if we're not, being responsible for our own healing?
Right.
One of the things I know for sure about you is that, and about you and your process, is that you have definitely opened up my eyes to how we can create options and possibilities and what that looks like. And you share that there are ways to change. We don't have to stay stuck. We don't have to stay where we are in misery and pain. And creating that space wherever you are, you can do that. And that's what it sounds like you've done, and you continue to do. So I look forward to accompanying you on this journey.
Thank you.
I hope that you continue to tell your story as you go. You continue to journal your journey as you grow and as you continue to heal and experience life. I definitely support and encourage for everyone a holistic wellness plan, or pathway. And I can tell that you've done that and you're doing the work. So I appreciate you, again, just sharing and sharing your process and pathway with us.
Thank you. I'd like to, if it's all right, I'd like to read just a small excerpt from one of the essays in my book. That highlights what you said. It's in relation when you talked about sharing, my journey with women in our age demographic. I did have a huge revelation, because I'd struggled with my son and his behavior for years, and I didn't understand it. But when I began to be introspective and be intentional about healing myself, then it made it easier for me to see the areas where he was hurting. And here's the section I wanted to read. And I said, parents, much of the trouble we have with our adult children is our inability to examine our own shortcomings in raising our children, in addition to surrendering our authority over them when they become adults. This is a serious problem that cannot be resolved without some level of introspection. That's the place where I met my shadow. Being introspective, I had to realize, lots of us, particularly in our culture, there's always Big Mom, and everybody got to do what Big Mom say. But, we have to realize what we're doing in that process is we're failing to surrender our authority over our children as they become adults, and that also inhibits them from healing. We don't teach them how to grow, how to develop, how to self-soothe and heal. Right. We don't empower them when we do that. We take that power away from them, and then when Big Mom is no longer here, everything crumbles. Yes. Right. Yes. No, I'm glad to hear you say that and acknowledge that, because that's something that's real. It's very real. It's very real. So I have to always find myself whenever I'm tempted. If my son asks me something, do what he asks. Don't offer him what he didn't ask me. Don't, you know what I'm saying? Just do, if he asks me a question, okay, here you go. Do you need anything? What can I do for you? Let him explore his own autonomy, because, how are you able to explore yourself as a person? Right? How are you able to connect to yourself if you don't feel like you have autonomy over your own life?
Well, you don't know who you are. When someone else is making all the choices, decisions, and control, you don't even know who you are. So you can't have authentic autonomy.
Exactly. It doesn't exist. Yeah. So, it doesn't exist. Yeah. It's about breaking the pattern.
No, that's true. Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely appreciate our listeners today. I appreciate your time. I am going to welcome them back to Dynamics of Dialogue. Hopefully I will be back at a later time to come in and to participate and being a co-host. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity, or guest host. I'm sorry, a guest host. Thank you for the opportunity. This is a part of my own personal growth and development process or journey. And as always, tune in every Sunday. I'll have to come back with some times, but we do post the shows on our page, follow our page, Dynamics of Dialogue, to tune in.
3 o'clock. Sundays at 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay.
All right, and I'll just leave everybody with this one last thought. Be intentional with your plans and manifest your best.